Hello, and welcome to another episode of Teaching with Inquiry Live. We're going to finish up our how-to series and go over my top 4 tips of things that you can do right now that will save you time during the school year. So things you can think of that you could prepare now that are organizational and kind of good components to have in your classroom, but they're definitely something that you can put a lot of the work in now so that you're not using your valuable time during the school year to be putting those together. So specifically, we are going to be looking at homework calendars and whether or not you can make those right now, creating your monthly newsletter, especially the template that you can simply just plug in current information and go. So the really hard work of designing it and laying those all out are done for you. You can also we're going to talk about creating a class spreadsheet and how you can use that in versatile ways to help you with your class list, making labels and such and so forth, and also how to make a master calendar. So we're going to go through all of those because they're definitely things that you can do now that are going to save you some much needed time down the road and hopefully help prepare you so that what you're looking at is you don't start off with the first 2 because you've got it done. And then as the year progresses, those things slip to the bottom of your to-do pile. If they're already done ahead of time, then it's not going to take a lot of your limited amount of time during the school year to do it. So spend some time now to get it set up and ready to go for the whole year so that you can maintain some consistency. I know for me, this is something that I am focusing on, and I'm going to be spending my time doing these things before school starts so that I can have them all throughout the year. Because one thing that I find I get really focused on in the back to school season is making sure my classroom is all set up and ready to go in picture perfect, which is great until about the 3rd day of school when it no longer looks like that. And now I probably actually have to really teach. So when we're thinking back to school, we need to think further than the 3rd day of school and what that's going to look like. So if you are new to the show, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Patty, and I am a 4-5 split grade teacher here in Ontario, Canada. And I come live every single Monday night to talk about inquiry-based teaching practices and all things inquiry and all things teaching, as that really touches all different parts of our classroom. And it is my hope that through sharing my story and sharing my tips and strategies with you, that I can help to make inquiry-based instruction practical and fun for both you and your students. So again, thank you so much for joining me. And tonight we are going to be digging into some of these things you can do now that are going to save you a lot of much needed time as the year progresses to help make sure that you can maintain some consistency and perhaps get a little few shortcuts in there as well. So let's get started. The first one that I think is good you can do ahead of time and then just send it out as it happens is a homework calendar. Now, I myself am not a huge proponent of extra work or unfinished work being sent home for homework or having there to be pages and pages of extra work. I do firmly believe that students need to be spending the majority of their time at home participating in extracurricular activities or playing outside or simply just spending their time with families. My idea is that I think kids should be with their families. However, the teacher part of me also recognizes that there's certain activities that are beneficial if students spend some time doing at home. And these are a lot of the routine practice that just help to supplement what's happening in the classroom. That it's not always finishing projects and unfinished work. Because I cannot assess anything that goes home, I do want any extra home practice to be that kind of basic level stuff that kids just need practice to be working on. So in comes the homework calendar for that very reason. In a homework calendar, or I've also seen it as a homework bingo card, you have a selection of activities that students can go through during their month, and they can choose those activities and they relate to the key learning objectives within your classroom, but they're activities that can be done at home. Even more so, these are activities that do not require the teacher a ton of prep or organizational time during the school year. So these are things that can be done at home without, say, the teacher needing to package up work pages and stuff them into his tangs and send them home. These are things that can be done at home with supplies at home, or by downloading things off of the internet, or even participating in events inside the home or inside the community that could extend understanding in the classroom. So what can you do practically to get these homework calendars up and running? So the first thing you need to do is use a word processing software such as Microsoft Word or Pages if you're on Apple. You can also use PowerPoint, Keynote, or even Microsoft Publisher. Really anything that allows you to create something digitally. Even Google Docs would work for this. I personally use Keynote or PowerPoint if you're on a PC to be able to make these calendars. So I open up the document and set up tables and borders so that it looks like a calendar. Alternatively, you can also use some of their preloaded content that is in there so that you can use the information, use the templates that they've provided. I know Microsoft Word and Pages, even Keynote and PowerPoint, you can find templates online for a simple calendar. Once you have the calendar loaded in to your program, you need to create 10 of them, one for every month of the school year. Now, in conjunction with your long range plans, you can generally get an idea of what it is that you're going to be covering when. It doesn't need to be exact, but you get a rough idea of which subjects you're going to be teaching in which terms and what the progression is. And if you've plotted it out versus months of what you're going to be teaching, then you have an idea of what you're going to be doing when. This will then shape what activities you put on your homework calendar. Now, for my homework calendar, I like to think of there being categories and of activities that students are going to do at home. Reading is always going to be a feature in the homework calendar. They will be asked to read for 15 to 20 minutes every day. Then they will have an alternate activity that will cycle through some of the following: basic number sense, addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, basic number facts, as well as place value. Learning to add and subtract up to 20 so that it's automatic, learning their multiplication tables up to 12 times 12. That's also a key feature that is embedded through a lot of the curriculum. So having students practice those skills regularly, whether it's 2 to 3 times a week through their homework calendar, is a great way to reinforce those skills and get students an opportunity to have further practice at home without necessarily you creating a lot of extra work pages as required. I also like to sometimes throw in cursive writing there. I do think it's important that students learn how to at least sign their name, but I don't have a lot of extra time in my day, in my school day, that would allow me to spend the amount of time it takes to teach students cursive writing. So as a result, cursive writing sometimes is as an option for some of our spelling activities in my classroom. And it's an option, we can embed that in art, but it's also an option for students to practice their cursive writing at home. And for those, I do actually just download some cursive writing work pages from the internet, and I do have those printed out for students to take home, and I do give links to parents if they themselves want to download cursive writing pages. Essentially, homework really is a plan that's negotiated between you and the parents versus what they want homework to look like in their own home, as well as my recommendations. I really want to empower parents through homework to take a more active role in their students' learning and not necessarily have it just be something that keeps them busy in the evening. So I also will include activities such as community adventures. So I want students to have an opportunity at least once a week with a suggestion to get out and try something, even if it's walking around your neighborhood and noticing different trees or collecting different leaves, or looking at the different animals that might be in your habitat, looking at the ecosystem if it's related to science, picking up some rocks on a walk with their family, and then examining them and seeing whether or not it's related to the subjects, looking through their recycling bin at home to decide whether or not they could reduce their consumption of different materials. All of those are options where it's a real practical application of the learning that might be happening in our science activities or math, where it's happening and they can go out. Even something as simple as going to the grocery store, which is something that parents have to do, is go to the grocery store and having their students see the difference in prices between different objects and understanding which pasta sauce is the best value for money by looking at unit prices is a really great practical application of something that we might do in school, but I'm not able to take students to the grocery store all the time and see that in real action. So if parents just have a conversation with their kids about why they picked that pasta sauce over another pasta sauce, that's a great learning opportunity. That's a practical application of something that can reinforce the learning that's happening in school. So those are kind of the categories, and I simply just plot them out on the calendar or bingo page as it's needed, and students can then either work weekly and do the same task every day, or as a bingo calendar, they can pick and choose which tasks they want to do each day. So they can, if there's 30 options for them to choose from, then they choose, maybe you have a goal of how many pieces of homework they're going to do in 1 month. So you really want to customize it for your community and your parent community, your student community, their level of background knowledge, and what is going to be most effective for your students. The thing with homework is you know your students the best, so planning something that is responsive to the needs of your students and extra activities that they can do at home is a good way. Now, not every student is going to do homework, and that's okay, but having a homework or bingo calendar for your class is a great way to give options to parents who want to do homework with their students or with their kids, but it doesn't put a ton of onus on you to be constantly prepping and planning materials that students will be required to use for homework. So it's a little more hands-off for teachers in terms of management, especially since we can't assess what's being done for homework anyways. If you've got a large class, you really need to look at what time it is that you're taking to spend on things, and homework probably isn't going to give you the greatest return on your investment in time. So marking someone's homework versus marking someone's science test, you should probably be marking their science test because it can count towards your own reporting and assessment. So talking about reporting and assessment, how do you collect and make the homework kind of incentivized? Because it is a learning skill to do homework. So we can evaluate maybe not the content of their homework, but we can create a system where we are evaluating whether or not the student is creating homework and using the appropriate learning skill to extend their understanding outside of school, because it will count towards a learning skill on their report card. So some of the options that you might have here is, first, you could simply make a large tracking label. So I've done this in the past where I will take parts of their agenda and see if like the Saturday, Sunday section is in their agenda, and students are never really writing on the Saturday, Sunday section. So if I measure the area of that section, the length and the width, it gives me the dimensions of that. I can then go ahead into my Keynote or PowerPoint and create a box inside PowerPoint that is the exact same size as that section in their agenda. And then in that box, I can create a little tracking page or tracking checklist. So it might say homework. I did homework on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and so it'll have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then it will have a little blank space for them to quickly write down what piece of homework they did. So if you did the bingo card, maybe you'd have a code, so they could write down the code for, maybe it's, B1 or I6, which part of the bingo card they did for their homework. And then you would have a third column that would say parent signature. where parents could just initial that, yes, in fact, the student did do that piece for their homework. So if you have that, then you would make as many of those little boxes as could fit on the page. And then you print those off and cut them up, and students would glue that little box into that section of their agenda every week. And they glue it in as part of one of your routines on, say, Monday. They glue in this little box in their agenda, and then they have it to track. So I've done that in the past. You can also, if it's not a large section, you can create a label using, say, one of the Avery labels that you can get at Staples or Walmart or any of those stores. You can create a label that simply just sticks into their notebook that would have the same thing. So maybe you'd want one of those really large labels, and on the label template that's provided, I think they provide them in Microsoft Word, you could simply make that same 3-column chart that would allow you to track it. And then there's no cutting and gluing. It's just pull off, peel, and stick. And you might be able to find a label that is close enough to a section in the agenda that would work. You could also just create a do-a-tang with the same thing that students could just track what they're doing in the do-a-tang, so they can put their homework calendar in the do-a-tang, and then maybe on the back of the homework calendar they can check off which they've done. So you can check that they're either doing homework or not doing homework, and you can give points if you use a classroom management system, such as, I know for me, I'm using my Kudos Club. If you have that classroom management system, you could give points if a certain number of students do homework every month. Or you could simply just not collect it at all. If that's how you so choose, and just make it, this is available to parents, and if you want to do it, great, but I'm not going to be collecting them or checking on them, that's fine too. So you decide what's going to work for you and how important the completion of homework is for you and your time, because it will take some time to put them in the agenda and collect them back if you really want to make students more accountable for completing homework. That's really a decision that you've got to decide based on your students. So that's homework calendars. I'm going to be creating my homework calendars that are going to reflect what I think my students will need. And I'm going to be doing that over the next couple of weeks as I'm finishing some other things for Madly Learning and doing some things for my own classroom. That's definitely something that I'm going to be working on so that I can have them ready to go before school starts, so that I'm not rushing on the 31st of every month to try to get the next homework calendar out, because it's definitely been a problem in the past. Another thing that you can do right now to get yourself set and ready to go so that you have something that you can create now and then use all year long is your classroom newsletter template. So this is, if you go into PowerPoint or Keynote, I would highly recommend these for the newsletter, because you can move around boxes and graphically make it just a lot prettier. And that's kind of important to me. You can go ahead and write the template of your newsletter. So you can block it out and figure out where your heading is going to be, what it's going to look like, what you're going to include in each section, and you can start writing out your idea of what you think you're going to be covering. So you can kind of have the perfect plan of what it is you're going to be covering each month. And in PowerPoint, you can simply just have a newsletter slide, create your template, duplicate it 10 times, change the top of the month for each of your 10 slides in your PowerPoint presentation, and then just start putting in information as you know is going to be happening. And then as different events come in that you know about, you can simply go into that newsletter template and just plug them in right there, because they're already ready to go and created. I'm going to actually go ahead in my own templates, and I'm going to start putting in subjects and what I want students to be working on, or what the learning goals are for that month, so that I have those ready to go. I actually have a pretty good understanding of what I'm going to be teaching when. It is with some fluctuations, of course, but in general, I'll have a good idea of what we're going to be covering each month, so I can go ahead and include that. Some of the sections I think you should consider including, and I'm thinking just a 1-pager, nothing too super fantastic, maybe a 2-pager if you've got that kind of ambition, but a 1-pager for sure is simple and easy if you do it now to go ahead and get it done all year long. So I'm going to be including in my own a news and noteworthy section, which just briefly reviews some different things that happened in the previous month after it finished, maybe some highlights, maybe a picture or two that just shows people what happened. I do have consent to be sharing pictures in this form of my students. I also think it's important to include the what we're up to. So going forward, so you're going to hand these newsletters out at the beginning of every month, and I'm doing mine digitally through my email service provider, so I will do my template most likely right in my email service provider, not in say Keynote or PowerPoint necessarily, unless I want a printable version of it. And if you're not sure how to do that, 2 episodes ago, I talked about using an email service provider called MailChimp to send out emails to parents for these newsletters and updates. So I'll include a news and noteworthy, what we're up to with the subject headings. So I'll do a math, a language, a science, and a social studies, and just a quick paragraph for what it is that we'll be working on for that subject in that month. I am also going to include an important dates or calendar section that lets parents know, just jot notes of some of the key important dates, a PA day, if I know there's a field trip coming up, if I know there's a special event in the school or in our classroom, I'm going to include that as I'm aware of them coming up. And finally, a section on home connections, giving parents a quick tip or quick ideas about what it is that they could do at home to reinforce some of those key learnings that I talked about in the previous section about what we're up to. So I think those are all important sections that you can fit in on a one-pager and then send out to parents. And if you're making these in Keynote or PowerPoint, when each month is completed, you simply just print that one slide to a PDF. So if you have it set up on your computer that you can print to PDF, then you select that one slide, print it to PDF, save it with that month title, and then you're ready to go to send that out. And using your long range plans as a guide here is a key idea as well. The third thing that I think is important to do is using a Excel spreadsheet to create your class list and class data. So one of the things I do at the beginning of the year, once I get my class list, is I open up an Excel spreadsheet and I create a spreadsheet of all of my class information. So I do their last name, their first name, their student number. So I code my students according to their location on my class list. So the first person on my class list will be 501, 502. When I have a split grade classroom, all of my 4s will get 401, 402, 403, and all my 5s get a 3-digit number starting with 5. I do this because it's easy for me to code all of their other belongings in the classroom with that same code, and I can use those over and over again. It helps me to get them to line up in an order. And I know I've talked about that before, coding my students. But I create this spreadsheet. So I include their code, their last name, their first name, their grade. I will also include, if they have an IEP, their reading level, if I know it, their previous math score. If they're coming in from grade 4, their EQAO scores, once I know them. All of my at a glance student information goes into this spreadsheet on my computer. The reason I do this is because if I'm ever creating labels or I'm creating class lists, I can set up what's called a mail merge in Microsoft Word. So when you go into Microsoft Word to create your labels, so if you want to create labels for your student notebooks, instead of retyping in your student names every single time you want to create a label, you can use what's called a mail merge. Now, I'm not the best person to explain what a mail merge is or how to walk you through that, but there's about 100 YouTube videos on how to create labels with a mail merge. Simply what happens is you tell Microsoft Word to go into your Excel spreadsheet and pull first name and last name. And you tell them where on the label, so instead of typing in the student's name on the label, you tell it what form field. So you would tell them what the heading is of that column on your spreadsheet. So it would say first name, space, last name. Then I hit enter, and on the second line, I would write student number. When that's ready, I copy them onto each one of the labels, the same thing, name, first name, last name, and then I click mail merge and all of my students will populate onto that label. And it's really handy to quickly create a label. And then if anything changes and say a new student comes in, all I have to do is go back into my Excel spreadsheet, add in a new student, and then go back into my student list and click update, and it automatically populates the new list into my labels or my forms. So I find this saves me time during the school year, because if I quickly need to be able to generate a label file, I can do that without having to retype out my class list every single time. And it might save me 5-10 minutes to do that, but that's 5-10 minutes that I could probably get another test marked. So I try to be as quick as possible and try to find some efficiencies in using digital resources. It's also really easy when I have an Excel spreadsheet. If I'm meeting with my learning resource teacher, I can share that with her and we can update the same spreadsheet. So I have information. So as my information updates, she has access to that. She can go in and pull that when she's writing IEPs for me. She can know what expectations, because I can link my long range plans. All of that is possible with Excel, and you can do the same thing with Google Forms. So if your Excel's kind of scary and you'd prefer to use Google Forms because you want it to be kind of versatile between devices, then that's an option too. The same thing can happen on Google Forms that you can make on Microsoft Excel. So create a class list on Excel and then watch a YouTube video on how to set up a mail merge with some tech experts. And once you get the hang of it, it's actually pretty easy to do, and it does end up saving you time, especially if you have a really transient community that you get new students all the time and you have to retype out your lists all the time. This is going to save you a lot of time because you change the list once and then that automatically will change all of the other places that you've used that list. Labels, assessment labels. I use labels a lot, so this is why it's helpful for me. And finally, the last thing that I think you can do to save yourself some time is to make a master calendar with your long range plans. So take your long range plans and actually put it right on a calendar so that you know what you're doing. If you can get a calendar that is a year at a glance, if you can pick it up at like Dollarama or Staples, or even I've seen people lately on Instagram making their own and then sending what they've made to Staples to print on a nice big poster size paper. And it's not terribly expensive to print on this extra large paper. So make a master schedule of what things are going to look like and what you're going to teach when, so that it's there. Sometimes the long range plans will have lots and lots of details, which is good for your teacher binder, but sometimes I really want to have a master schedule that's just really visual instead of really technical. So that's definitely going to be a goal area for me, is to create a big master schedule that has everything I need to know in terms of what I'm teaching where, important dates, different to-do list things, like when those calendars, homework calendars and newsletters need to go out. If I plot all of that on a master calendar, then it is my hope that this is going to be something that's going to help me save time. And I'm going to make sure that that's posted prominently in my classroom so that I can see it all at a glance, and it's very visual for me. And it's in my face all the time. So something I can look at frequently in my room. Those are the 4 things that I am going to be doing now, and I would encourage you to do now as well, to spend a little bit of time here and there between your time sitting on the patio, reading a book. Definitely do that still while your summer is here, but as you're feeling some of those anxious feelings coming back up, feeling like you've got to get ready to go back to school, think about what it is that you can do now that's actually going to save you time, not September 1st or September 2nd or September 3rd, but like November 23rd, January 15th, March 22nd. Think about what you can do now that's going to save you time down the road in the long run, what efficiencies that you can do now where you're not teaching and assessing and answering phone calls and writing your reports and inside the crazy that is our life as teachers. Think of what things that you can do now that would set yourself at ease and have systems in place now so that when you're in school, you can just do it and it's not going to take you time from creating it all from scratch. So those are my goals of what I'm going to be doing to plan for the long year ahead, as opposed to I still am going to be planning for where my furniture's going and what my borders are going to look like and all the pretty things too. But I have to remember to focus not just on the pretty things, but also on these long-term strategies that are going to make living in my classroom and maybe even living with me at home a little bit more enjoyable and stress reduced. So thanks so much for joining. If you've got any tips of things that you do now to reduce your stress and to make yourself more efficient throughout the school year, please put it in the comments below and share your tips and strategies with us all. So thank you very much for joining me. I will see you next week for another episode of Teaching with Inquiry Live. Bye for now.